Alright, so we have won the die roll. And let's see what we got. Alright, well, gonna have to mulligan, only one land, and we do have a double black spell in hand. Not one double black spell, 5 double black spells. So, definitely gonna take a mulligan here. And this isn't all that much better actually, but we do have a scry. So if we hit a green source, we have access to traverse. Think we probably have to keep this, unfortunately. And murder, definitely not the card we wanted to see on top, so just gonna lead off here with a swamp. But not really happy about the spot we're in. If we do draw the forest, we can play Grimflayer and then have a bunch of removal and the traverse available to us. If we don't draw the green source, things are gonna become pretty difficult. So there's an Attune with Aether getting an island. Interesting. So this might not be much of a game, unfortunately. So we'll see if our opponent's playing something like the Marvel deck. And if our opponent is playing Marvel, that actually could be kind of a good thing for us, just because that's going to be a tough matchup for us game 1 anyways. So get our bad hand out of the way here. But we did hit the Blossoming Marsh, so all is not lost. And we can play our Grimflayer. And with the Marvel deck, you never know, because sometimes they just don't have the Marvel. And we can hope for that to be the case here. So contingency plan is a nice way to help find it. We definitely don't want our opponent to keep any of the cards on top with the contingency plan. So we see 4 cards getting binned. We'll see if the 5th one... So it looks like our opponent is keeping 1 card on top of their library, which is pretty dangerous for us. And there's a Vessel of Nascency as a follow-up. So our opponent's having a pretty good draw here. I think what we want to do is go ahead and use the Traverse now to just get a forest. That way we can follow up with the Grimflayer, and we'll get in for our 2 damage now, and we can sort of pick and choose what we want on top of our deck. None of these cards are really that exciting, so I think we just want to put them all in the graveyard, actually. And by doing so, we do give ourselves Delirium, so now we've got 2 4/4s. So hopefully our opponent does not play a Marvel on this particular turn. That would be worst case scenario for us. If our opponent does basically anything else, we have to be pretty happy about it. There's an Aether Meltdown, okay. So that's going to shut down essentially one of our Grimflayers. And a Glintnest Crane, okay, so it's possible that our opponent has yet to find Aetherworks Marvel. And there's a Woodweaver's Puzzle Knot, which is revealed. So our opponent's got plenty of energy. So we could get rid of this Glintnest Crane right now. But I like going ahead and starting with an attack. We'll see if our opponent blocks or not. So, yep, just going to go ahead, get in with the Grimflayer. Our opponent is electing to block, so I think this means we just might as well fire off the Grasp of Darkness here. Just to get in that extra 4 damage. And, okay, so we see some interesting ones. Tireless Tracker, Forest, Noxious Gearhulk. I think we probably want the Tireless Tracker here. The other cards, not as high on. We might want the forest. Alright, let's keep the tracker on top. And that way we don't even have to play our land here. We can wait so that we get a clue next turn with our land drop. Still 5 types in the graveyard. So, alright, our opponent's got the Attune with Aether. The Vessel of Nascency represents another way to find a Marvel. And we also have to be worried about our opponent's card types increasing in case Emrakul becomes a player in this game. So, alright, so there's the contingency plan. So our opponent does not yet have it, which is the good news. The bad news is that our opponent has contingency planned and Vessel, so they're favored to find the Aetherworks Marvel. And if Aetherworks Marvel is found, we're still going to find ourselves in a pretty tough spot. So the plan here is just going to be bash our opponent down to 13 on our turn, and then follow up with the Tireless Tracker. All right. Good news, no second Aether Meltdown. That would have been a bit of a blowout if our opponent had had a second one there. And not really that interested in any of these options, actually. So I'm going to go ahead and just bin these. One Lily, and we have 2 lands. So we're going to now play the tracker, get a clue, and we're kind of at least trying to claw back into the game here. Despite the mulligan and missed second land drop, all is definitely not lost. So let's see. All right, our opponent has yet to actually find Aetherworks Marvel. Did not hit it off the Vessel of Nascency. Looks like our opponent just got a land off of that, but here's a Glintless Crane. So this is yet another way to find the Marvel itself. But it looks like our opponent has actually whiffed on the Glintless Crane. So definitely a weird game here. That's for sure. And now a blue puzzle knot, and that's yet another way to scry to find the Aetherworks Marvel. So our opponent actually hasn't drawn any of the big creatures, which is weird, but has yet to find the Marvel. So okay. Definitely interested in cracking the clue. I think we want to take care of our opponent's Glintless Crane, and we may actually want to try to get this Deadweight into the graveyard as well, to provide another card type towards getting to Emrakul. So I think we want to just go ahead, crack a clue here to start. And that's going to make our Tireless Tracker into a 4-power creature. And okay, here is a Grimflayer. So now we actually may not want to fire a removal spell off. But I do want to use this Deadweight because we want it in the graveyard. And if our opponent chumps the tracker, that's perfectly fine. So we're still going to get this Grimflayer trigger here. Looks like Kaladesh and 2 copies of Traverse the Ulvenwald. So I think that we don't want the Kaladesh, but we do want to keep 1 Traverse on top of our deck. And now we're just basically on the 4-power creature beatdown plan. We'll see exactly what our opponent's got here, because our opponent is all the way down to 12. So here's the Aetherworks Marvel. Now if our opponent completely misses, we are going to win the game with our 4-power creatures. So we'll see if our opponent can find an Ulamog or an Emrakul here. Worst case scenario would be Emrakul, because we've got 2 removal spells in hand. Our opponent can take our turn, basically kill off all of our creatures with Emrakul. So we definitely don't want that to happen. And it looks like our opponent actually found another Aetherworks Marvel. So this is basically a redraw because our opponent had so much energy. This second Aetherworks Marvel can be activated this turn. So this is going to mean our opponent's down to 5 energy, and we'll see if a big creature comes off of this activation. I would expect it to. Our opponent's pretty likely to find Ulamog or Emrakul, but you never know. With this deck, you really don't. It could be that it was a break, but it's not. Emrakul, that's really bad for us, so we can just hope that our opponent doesn't take our turn correctly. But unfortunately, that's... even if our opponent messes up our turn a little bit, it's still going to be really tough to beat this Emrakul at this point. Our opponents can, on their turn, activate the Aetherworks Marvel again. So there's the Traverse. Looks like our opponent might elect not to search. One advantage our opponent gains by doing that is to be able to look through our deck. I expect either the Murder or the Grasp of Darkness to be used to get rid of one of our creatures. Then our opponent can attack and get rid of another one of our creatures. So yep, there's the Tireless Tracker coming in. Our opponent's just going to block that with Emrakul. And so we'll see if we can peel something to try to find a way back in here. Mindwreck Demon. I think we just want to crack the clue. There's a Grapple with the Past. Okay. We've got 7 card types in our yard. I guess we can fire off the Grapple right now. And we actually did find an Emrakul. Huh. Alright, we'll bring back our Emrakul and hope that we miraculously are able to cast it this game. We do have 7 card types in our graveyard. So we're just looking for one more land to be able to cast the Emrakul. But our opponent may just shut the door on the game this turn. So look, here's the puzzle nut getting cracked. So basically, if our opponent finds Ulamog here, then the game's pretty much over. And there's the Ulamog. Our opponent is going to exile 2 lands, and that's going to shut us out of the game. So let's go to game 2. That's kind of what the Marvel deck does sometimes, is it looks like you might have a chance, and then right at the end, the door closes. But we do have a pretty decent sideboard plan for this matchup. We're going to want our Transgress the Minds, and Pick the Brains, and Distended Mindbender. So we're going to be loading up on discard. We can also consider some of the artifact and enchantment removal, stuff like Natural State. To the Slaughter is a removal spell that can deal with an Emrakul, so I like it more than some of our other removal. So some of the removal that isn't that great in the matchup is just most of our removal spells. So Deadweight, Grasp of Darkness, even Murder is not really where we want to be. And even Ruinous Path, which can kill an Emrakul, is just, when our opponent takes our turn, it's pretty likely that we're going to have creatures in play that our opponent can use these removal spells on. So we can take out Ruinous Path and bring in Tireless Tracker. And then similarly, the Noxious Gearhulk really isn't necessary. We can, however, try to cast our own Emrakuls. We're a little bit better at trying to hardcast Emrakul than our opponent is, so we do have that going for us. And we don't really need to board in artifact and enchantment removal just to kill Puzzle Knots. So, yep, let's go ahead and submit this for game 2. And I will say that the Appetite the Unnatural does get rid of the Marvel itself, but that's not necessarily the game we want to be playing. We want to have our creatures in our deck and potentially discard that Marvel when we can. Because it's hard to keep mana up for something like Appetite the Unnatural. So we are going to keep this hand. Hissing Quagmire, Blossoming Marsh. So we are going to want to just play these lands on our first few turns, and then we don't necessarily need to traverse right now. We can wait and see if we want to use it to get a land or not. So I like just passing the turn here. We're going to play Tireless Tracker on turn 3 most likely. So here is the Glassblowers Puzzle Knot. And the Puzzle Knots are just one of the best ways the Marvel deck can set up their library. And a lot of the cards, as we saw in Game 1, are just there to basically find the Marvel. Once our opponent does have Marvel in play, it is going to be tough to win. Unfortunately, we did not have a discard spell in our opener. I still think that we wanted to keep this hand, but we're definitely... the shields are down a little bit. So we're hoping to dodge the turn 4 Marvel, which sometimes your opponent just has it. If our opponent has it here, not much we're going to be able to do. So the contingency plan, once again, we're going to see that card come into play here. And our opponent's binning an Aetherworks Marvel, so that's pretty scary to see that happening. And I wonder if our opponent was looking for a land or something specific, but either way, that's just pretty bad news for us. So we can get in with the Tireless Tracker and follow up with the Pilgrim's Eye. But we're definitely not in great shape. This is one of the more difficult matchups for the black-green deck. And we're seeing just how powerful the Marvel deck can be against a deck that doesn't have a ton of ways to interact with the Marvel. Even if we had something like an artifact removal spell here, our opponent would still be in decent shape. Although our opponent can't actually activate the Marvel this turn, so we do have that going for us. We may want to try to start getting card types into our graveyard to get towards Emrakul. So we've got two options with this Liliana. We can either minus it or plus it, but I kind of like minusing it. We hit 2 lands, which is fine because we didn't really want to draw those lands anyways. And now we can crack a clue with our Tireless Tracker. Mind Rack Demon is a great way to enable Delirium, but our opponent is going to be able to activate the Aetherworks Marvel this turn. So here's a Wood Weaver's Puzzle Knot. That's going to make sure our opponent has more than enough energy here. A Glintnest Crane. That is pretty good as well. And we'll see, our opponent's probably about to spin the wheel here with Aetherworks Marvel. And it looks like instead our opponent has opted to pass. And that's almost scarier because it's hard to know what to do in this spot. Because our opponent can easily find an Emrakul or find an Ulamog off of the Aetherworks Marvel. So we can actually take a bit of a conservative line here and just not attack because we're scared of a big creature coming into play. I think we want to start off with a Mind Rack Demon though and try to get cards into our graveyard and hit Delirium for starters. So now we have 4 card types in our graveyard. And I think that's fine. We're just going to plus on the Glintnest Crane here and pass. And we'll respect our opponent having something to put into play here off of the Aetherworks Marvel. Because we really want to try to get our Emrakul into play. And so here's the Ulamog. So it'll be interesting to see what our opponent goes after with the Ulamog. It looks like it's going to be our 2 creatures. So unfortunately the issue with Ulamog is that beyond the 10-10, the exiling 20 of our cards is a huge issue because that's just 2 attacks essentially. So 1 attack now and then 1 attack next turn could just do it for us this game. Kozilek's Return, that's going to deal with our Pilgrim's Eye. So we can go ahead and fire off this grapple with the past and try to get enough card types in our graveyard. So we have 6 card types, but we do need an extra land in order to cast Emrakul. So let's go ahead and grab a land, and we'll see what we can do here with our Emrakul. So, yep, just gonna go ahead and cast Emrakul here. The issue, though, is we don't really have a great way of actually getting this Ulamog off the table. And, okay, so there's an Emrakul. And our opponent can't actually cast the Emrakul. So what we can do here is we can go ahead and sacrifice the Glassblower's Puzzle Knot and scry and see what we can find off the Aetherworks Marvel. But to be honest, it just seems pretty bleak here, our chances, because there's not that many ways of actually dealing with this Ulamog. So, yeah, Island, Aether Hub, we're going to bottom both of those. And we can activate the Marvel here. And, yep, all we're seeing is really a Puzzle Knot, a Marvel, a Tune, contingency plan. So, basically, the situation is that our opponent, we can attack with Ulamog, but it's indestructible. So once it attacks again, our entire library is going to be gone. So we actually can't win here. So I'm just going to go ahead and concede.